You are listening to the Novel Writing Podcast. Grab a cup, cozy up, and let's get to writing. Today I'm talking with Seth Ring, who has written several best-selling series, including Battle Mage Farmer and the Tower series. He works across a wide range of genres, from Western to lit-RPG to suspense, to create absorbing worlds and lovable characters that offer more than mere escapism. So, Seth, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Let's dive right in. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about you and what you write?
Sure. So I write a genre called lit RPG and a little bit of progression fantasy as well. These are new and growing science fiction and fantasy genres. They're really just sort of a modern evolution of your classic sci-fi or your classic fantasy. Most lit RPG involves some sort of game mechanic that either drives the plot or the world building. And that can be as simple as a stat screen where somebody can look at it and see what kind of skills they have. It can be as complex as an entire XP system that, once you complete quests or you kill monsters, you get stat points and grow that way. So there's a huge breadth in it, which I love because I like to write a lot of different kinds of things. But I mainly focus on aspirational stories where the good guys are good and the bad guys are bad, and there's a clear distinction between the two. And our heroes are always looking to benefit the people around them and to grow and explore new worlds. So that's really what I like to write.
You're a bit of a world traveler too, so how is
I
that
am.
factored into your writing?
Yeah, so I grew up overseas in Ghana, West Africa, and I've traveled fairly extensively throughout the world and throughout the US, and I think that it really awoke in me this intense love for going to new places and seeing new things and finding familiarity there. One of the things that I learned to be true from my travels when I was younger is that every place in the world is the same in many ways, and that no place you visit or even go back to is ever the same. And so there's this magic of newness in the world every day, and there's this magic of familiarity no matter where you go. And so the world is really a wonderful place, and I try to represent that in the worlds that I build. World building is a huge passion of mine, and I always try to have that newness and that familiarity sort of tied in together in the worlds I build and in the spaces I like to have my characters explore.
I love that. It kind of reminds me of how no matter how many times you go back and read the Bible, you always find something new in it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very much that sense of you can, even if you're seeing a familiar vista, right? There's always something about it that you can learn or something that you can notice, something that's going to help you grow. And the Bible is 100% like that. You can every time you read it, yeah, there's always something new.
So I met you at Realm Makers, where
Hmm.
you revealed that you dictate all of your books
Yes.
and could conceivably produce a 120,000 word novel in little longer than a week.
Yes.
And when I told this to my friends, they were all very skeptical and have a ton of questions, which I will be asking you.
Sure.
But before I do that, what is the high level explanation of your writing process, all the way from
Sure.
you have an idea to it's published?
So I've been thinking about this a lot because I have honestly just been getting questions around my process a lot. It developed over a period of years, and I didn't realize how sort of unusual or counter to normal advice it is. I just thought, oh, this it works for me, and it must work for everybody. So I've spent a good bit of time recently analyzing my process, and what I've essentially discovered is that I operate like a spring. And so I'll have an idea and I'll be interested in exploring a concept or a character or a particular plot point. And over time, I will very, very slowly build on it. And normally, what I do is I have the initial idea and then I just let it go. I don't write it down, I don't do anything with it. I just have a cool idea and I just let it be what it is. And then, if the idea reoccurs to me, I consider it good enough that I want to write it down. And then I'll write it down, but I still won't spend time on it, right? And then over time, more and more ideas, usually while I'm in the shower or I'm out walking, or something like that. We all have those creative moments. And the story that I've got in the back of my head will pop up and I'll start thinking about it again and I'll start fleshing out little bits of it. And then one day, it just sort of sits with me long enough that I decide I'm going to write this. Once I get to that point, I will typically sit down and do a very brief outline. We're talking about a sentence, maybe a couple of words, a small phrase for each chapter. And then inside each chapter, maybe 5 story beats per chapter for what I want to achieve in that chapter. And once I have that outline, I write that outline and then I just don't pay a lot of attention to it. I'm very much a discovery writer. My first probably 7 or 8 books, I wrote no outline, nothing, pants, beginning to end, just straight through, discovering what was going to happen next. That's my preferred style of book to read, and that's my preferred style of book to write. But once I get to that point where I have that outline, and that normally takes me a day or two to write the outline, I like to, and sometimes life interferes with this, and so this process stretches out a little bit. But my preferred method to write the book is to get up on the first day at 5 a.m., start writing, end writing about 5 p.m., have dinner with my family, and then write in the evening, and then just do that for 6 days in a row. And again, that's not always possible, right? And so when it's not possible, then I'll stretch it out and I'll write in the mornings and I'll write till 5 and then I won't go back and write in the evenings, or I'll write till noon and I won't write in the afternoon, and that sort of stretches out the time period. But I like to write my stories this way because I believe that I can actually create a tighter story because all of the details are there present with me while I'm writing. And I'm not forgetting pieces of it because I'm essentially just living in that world and walking alongside the character in this 6 day period, right? Or a 12-day period, or, whatever it ends up being. But incidentally, if you write around 20,000 words a day, you can just finish a book in 6 days, right? Often I'll get the question, and I'm sure, this is top of mind for everybody right now. Can you write a good book in 6 days? And the answer is with enough practice, yes, because you can train yourself to do the majority of the editing before the words actually come out of your mouth if you're dictating, or before you actually type. And so I have spent a significant amount of time training myself to produce the words that I actually want to say before I say them. Or before this, I started with typing, right? Training myself to write a clean manuscript from the very beginning. So I'm going to do all of my editing internally, and I'm going to make sure that I know what I want to say as I say it. Obviously, there's always editing on the back end, but the other piece of this that's really important is that I have a very particular editing process, which is that every day I write my words and then I upload them to Google Documents. And I have this Google Doc with between 12 and 20 people who read and edit and comment on the story as I am writing it. And so I create this feedback loop where every day I go in and I read what people are saying about my story and the comments I'm getting, and I read the corrections that people are making, and I accept or I reject the corrections, and then I address the comments, and that allows me to tune my writing to my target audience, which is this group of readers. And I still make all of the creative decisions because I'm responsible for the book, and it's my story to tell. But because I'm getting that immediate feedback, it allows me to course correct before I overextend, right? Sometimes when you're writing a full manuscript and then giving it to people to read, people will come back and say things like, oh, there's really just no space to breathe in between, the first 6, 7 chapters. You really need a moment there. Or these characters they're a little bit flat. And if you have a whole manuscript, it's really hard to go back and it's really hard to fix the characters all the way through a manuscript to make sure they're not flat, or to add in those moments to breathe without ruining the pacing of your story, or the really not the pacing of your story, but the plot of your story. Whereas if you're making the adjustments on the fly and somebody's just flagging and saying, "Hey, this seems really flat," then it's easy to say, "Okay, as I move forward, I just need to pay special attention to this particular character to make sure that they're engaging, to make sure that the readers are going to appreciate them, to make sure they have a reason to be in this story." Right? And you can do the same thing with your plot. You can do the same thing with your pacing. You can do the same thing with your dialogue. You just need somebody to put up that flag and say, "Hey, you might want to take a look at this." So then, by the end of this process, right, whether it's 6 days or 12 days or 20 days, doesn't matter. By the end of this process, I have a manuscript that is ready for its final edits and then is ready to be sent off for publication. So that's the process. It's pretty intense, and it has taken me time to develop it and to be able to do it, but I find it tremendously life-giving. I really enjoy it as a methodology for writing, um, even though it is very different than what you typically hear, when you get writing advice.
I still can't wrap my brain around the fact that you're writing that much in that short a period of time. And when we're talking about writing for you, it's all dictation, but
Yes.
also giving it to people like 12 to 15 people in that Google Doc, and then they're just on it.
hmm That has
So,
also taken a lot of time, right, to
right,
develop. That's
right,
not something that you just wake up one day and you're like, "Oh, I have 15 people in my life who want to read what I write every single day as I write it and then
right.
give me feedback on it." Because that takes a lot of time and commitment.
So how did that system develop?
So I started my writing career writing online as an amateur and writing serialized fiction. And so I got really used to this process of creating content and immediately publishing it with no edits at all. And then just taking feedback in the comments. And when I say feedback, I mean bruises, right? As people are like, "This is awful. You spelled everything wrong. Your characters suck. This plot is going nowhere." And so I got used to dealing with that kind of feedback. Well, from the serialized world, I ended up working alongside a couple of other people who were doing this simultaneously. We sort of developed a model, each independently, watching what the other people were doing. We developed a model for taking serialized content to Amazon. And the midway point for that was something called Patreon, which is a subscription platform where you can create things, you can put them up, and people will pay you monthly for them. And so I serialized my fiction, right? I wrote serialized fiction as an amateur and then just gave it away for free. And then eventually there were enough people who liked it that I could ask people to pay for it. And then I would take complete books once they were finished and I would put them on Amazon, right? And so for the first 2 years of my writing career, that was my model. Well, what that does is it creates this comfort with being able to get that feedback immediately, and it teaches your readers to give you feedback immediately, to just comment on whatever chapter it is and say, "Oh, I like this," or "I don't like this," or you spelled this name wrong, or "You've completely deviated from the plot. I thought we were trying to solve this problem, and now we're over here solving this problem," right? Which is all great feedback. And because I had this community of people who were really eager to read my work and were willing to pay me to do it, I was able to take the top maybe, 2 to 3% of that group and say, "Hey, do you want to get this information? Like, do you want to get this content before even Patreon does? Because I can just invite you to my Google Doc as I'm going, right? And I'll write and then I'll post it in Google Docs, and you can jump in anytime and you can read it ahead of time, right? Before anybody else gets it." And then as I started to do that, I started to see the value in in that live feedback loop where I'm writing on Monday, people are reading on Monday afternoon or Monday evening or Tuesday morning, and I'm getting that feedback before I even step into my next chapter. And then I just sped the whole process up, right? I started moving a little bit faster. And I will say this feedback loop is a lot easier for people to manage when I'm posting 2 chapters a day as opposed to 8 chapters a day. Right. I recognize that. But I have a bunch of readers who have been with me for quite a while, for years now, and they've been reading everything I write and they've been moving through it. And now I have a pipeline that I try to use for new readers who are coming into my work, and are really excited about it. That over time, using Discord, using my email newsletter list, over time they can sort of join this group of advanced beta readers. And yeah, they can get access too.
And you actually have a video that describes this process in detail, and I
I
believe you
do.
also have linked in that a PDF which describes the process again in detail. So
Yes.
we can put that video in the description for people to get that cheat sheet.
Yeah.
So with this process that you've honed in over all these years,
Hmm.
um, on your website it says you have 25 books out, but I know you have way
That
more
is
than
wrong.
that. Right.
Yeah.
So what is the official number as of today of how many you have published?
That's a great question. I think I have 41 published and a couple more written.
Wow.
Hmm.
Wow. That's nuts. Bonkers. But it's awesome. Super
As soon as
cool.
I started dictating, it just sped up pretty
Yeah.
drastically.
Yeah.
I essentially doubled my output going from, um, well, more than doubled my output going from 5 books a year, which was about the max that I could do typing, to writing 12 to 16.
So how long does it take to adjust to dictating versus actually typing the book?
That is a great question. And the answer is going to be slightly different for everybody. For me, it took 13 hours to sort of break into the skill, and then another 7 or so hours to get comfortable with it. And I'm not talking about like, oh, I'm going to dictate, and then I spend 3 minutes actually dictating and half an hour messing around with dictation. I mean, it took me 13 logged hours of speaking for the skill to flip into that mindset. And it was really rough for those first 13 hours. And then I just stuck with it. And then all of a sudden it clicked. And then it became easier than typing. And in a lot of ways now, I find it much harder to write by typing than I do just by telling a story. And again, part of that is just because of how I've portioned my time and what I spend my time on, like practicing, and also the particular way that I dictate. So I think for everybody it's going to be a little bit different. I will say that it's not a shortcut in the way people normally think of a shortcut, right? People normally think of a shortcut as like easier, right? But the reality is that if writing a book is climbing a mountain, instead of walking the like 2 mile loop that like curls around the mountain to get you to the top, I just got really good at rock climbing and I can just go straight up, right? The amount of effort is is the same, probably even a little bit more. It's just that I pack all of that effort into a shorter period of time. It's the same, like it's not easier to write a book in 6 days than it is to write a book in 2 months. It's just that what's difficult about it is slightly different. It's a different kind of skill, and and you can train yourself to do both equally well. The the real magic of dictation comes in the long term as you look at your career over time. Because if I were to spend, you know, 2 weeks out of the year writing, like dictating, and I would dictate 2 books out of the year, during the year, that's fine. And would be the same as if I had a career where I just wrote 2 books by hand every year. I wanted to publish quickly. I wanted to build a big backlist. I have lots of things to say, lots of stories to tell. Talking has never been a challenge for me. And I realized pretty early in my career that the max I could do typing was, again, about 5 books. And then once I discovered dictation, I realized that I could just put in twice the effort and write 10 books, but I could actually fit them into my schedule with dictation, whereas I literally couldn't fit them in, like, I couldn't fit 10 books into my schedule typing. I just don't type fast enough. My fingers don't work like that. My mouth, on the other hand, certainly does. Sort of what I'm trying to get at is that dictation isn't dictation is a fix for certain kinds of problems. It's not a universal solution, right? If your problem is that writing is hard, I'm sorry, it's always going to be hard. It's just difficult to do, right? And and there are pieces of it that get easier over time, but in some ways it is harder for me to write a book today than it was when I was starting out. And the reason is because I'm a better writer and I'm more aware of the mistakes that I make and I'm more aware of what quality actually is. My books today are better than my books yesterday, and it's actually harder for me now to write a book because my requirements are so much higher, right? So the writing never gets easier in that sense. Processes can be easier and time frames can be shorter, right? And so dictation is just a way of solving a different problem. It's not solving the writing is hard problem, it's solving the how do I publish more books faster.
So it takes basically the same amount of creative energy to create the story, to produce the story, to write the story, but you're doing it in a shorter amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. You're still going to find yourself, and anybody who dictates, I see them in this cadence, right? They'll dictate and then they have longer lull periods, right? Creativity is very much a wave. You cannot stay at the top all the time. You have to have periods of filling, and you have to have periods of rest in there. And with dictation, those things tend to be a little bit more distinct. Whereas if you're typing, everything sort of just blends together, or writing by hand, or however you write. It just all sorts of sort of blends together. Whereas with dictation, I see people having a much sharper, and mine is obviously more exaggerated than most people because most people just don't want to dictate for 8 hours a day, which is smart. But you have these periods of intensive creativity, and then you have these lull periods where you are refilling the well, where you are consuming other content, where you are um, spending time doing other activities to recharge that creativity and get it, back up to the point where you can write another book.
I'm glad you said that because I think this leads into the next question about people who have tried dictation, but they either couldn't get through the learning curve or they didn't know that they had to take that creative break in between.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to writers who either haven't gotten through that learning curve of they need to spend at least 20 hours just sticking
Mhm.
with it, or they've been trying to dictate nonstop without any refreshing time?
Both are things that I have done. The first time I tried dictation, it did not work. I got like a couple hours into it, and I was like, "This sucks. I don't like it. What I'm producing is awful. Like I type well, I write well as typing. Why would I ever do anything different?" And then because I'm just really bad with time management, I ended up getting myself in a position where I had to write a book pretty fast and was like, all right, fine, I'm going to do it. Other people say they can do it, I'm going to do it. So that's actually how I stumbled into it. But my first attempt was abject failure, right? I didn't like it at all. And I thought to myself, there's no way that I could ever shift my brain into whatever is required to be able to do this. And that turned out to not be true, right? Again, because I actually spent the time and I went through it. For people who are dictating and are getting frustrated because they feel like they're slowing down, what I would say is that, and this is a quote from one of my favorite books, Atomic Habits, right? We don't rise to the level of our opportunities, we fall to the level of our systems. And if you are finding your dictation slowing down, if you're finding it harder and harder to motivate yourself to dictate, then it is probably the architecture around your dictation that's the problem. It's not the actual dictation itself. And this is true for all writing habits. If you are finding yourself, dreading sitting down and writing, or you're finding yourself sitting down to write and then getting distracted and walking away after a few minutes, it's probably the architecture around your processes rather than the actual action of writing itself. And so I would suggest that, for people who are interested in doing it, Stick with it. Be willing to just put in the really hard work to get over that initial hump to because once you do, it gets a lot easier. And also, pay careful attention to the way you are organizing your space and your life so that you can really try and um, clear the space to do the thing you want to do, right? And sometimes that means not doing it. Sometimes that means going for a walk. Sometimes that means taking a break and not just trying to push through and grind it out, right? Sometimes you have to grind it out because that's what life requires. But you're probably not going to love that work as much as you love work that is flowing from a place of rest, that is flowing from a place of creativity. Uh, that work is probably going to be closer to what you actually want than work that you just hammer out because you feel like you have to do it.
So you have a specific architecture, bookscribe.ai. Um,
Yes.
yeah, so bookscribe.ai is your architecture. And I will say for everybody listening, I did test it. I was able to put in an audio recording of a previous podcast episode and just watch it do the work, and it's pretty cool. So with bookscribe.ai, can you just give a little bit of a description of how that works and what the end product is?
Sure. So Bookscribe is essentially my writing or my dictation process put onto a website so that everybody can make an account and use it. I got tired of setting up Google Drive folders for people so that they could use it because told a couple friends about it. They were like, Seth, what the heck? You're putting out books way faster than you used to. What's going on? And so I told them about it. They started using it, and then next thing I knew, I had 30 some people in Google Drive folders, which was a mess. And so we just turned it into essentially a web app, right? And it is very simple. You upload an MP3 or you record directly into the browser. It kicks out a transcription and then it adds punctuation into the transcription. So you do not have to dictate your punctuation, which for me was the single largest hurdle for dictation. I could not get over that. It was so distracting to me because I am awful with Grant. Like I'm just bad technically as a writer. And I never know where my commas are supposed to go. And I always relied on sort of other people or like my spell checker to figure all of that stuff out after the fact. So having to actually try and like put all of that into the dictation just didn't work at all for me. So Bookscribe does that process for you, right? It creates a transcription of your work, and in its current form, it just kicks out essentially the transcribed text with all of that punctuation in and some paragraph breaks. We are working on, actually, I was just testing today an in-browser editor to allow you to edit content in the browser window. That's going to then expand. You can add comments, you can add notation, all of that kind of stuff. That's going to expand into the ability to share it with other people and the ability to aggregate a bunch of clips into a single document and then add to that document as you go so that we're essentially replacing the functionality of Google Drive. And there's a very specific reason that we want to build it this way. And that is that with the advent of AI, no content that you put online is safe. If you put it on Google Drive, if you put it into Word, if you put it anywhere that is backed up to the cloud, that is not completely isolated, it's going to scrape it and it's going to use it to train the AI that's running in the background. And I don't love that. I don't, I'm not into generative AI when it comes to writing. I don't think it's a helpful or good thing. And so Bookscribe.ai is essentially a non-generative AI assistant that handles the transcription and will eventually do some other assistant-like things, right? Never building content for you because you should be building the content, but assisting you in a bunch of different data aggregation tasks that will just take you a long time, right? Like going through your transcribed text and adding in all of the punctuation and adding all of the paragraph breaks and adding all of that kind of stuff. But it's really pretty slick. It can pick up multiple speakers in in a piece of text. We're still working on making it more accurate. I would say that right now it's probably like 95% accurate. There's still some times when if you have repeated words, it it sort of trips up. But it's getting better very, very quickly. And if you're interested in using it, you can currently use it for free. It's not going to be free forever, but you are welcome to jump on and try it out and see if it's something that you're interested in. But yeah, that's bookscribe.ai.
We'll put a link to that in the description. One of the questions that my friends had about this particular piece of software were
Mm-hmm.
things like, does it pick up on dialect, or if somebody has a different accent, does it accurately transcribe those? And then things like, how does it do with made up fantasy names?
Made up fantasy names, it's just going to do its best,
Okay.
and you're gonna have to go in and edit. One of the features we'd like to add is a personal lexicon, and then we would like to give people the option of training a specific model, a specific LLM on their work, right? So it's not going to get input from anybody else, and it's not going to kick that training to anybody else. It's just going to be a personal model for you on your account that you'll be able to specify the filters on. So I don't want to get into the weeds here, but the way LLMs work is they produce data, and then that data is run through a set of filters, and those filters determine the final output, right? If you got raw LLM or AI model data, you wouldn't be able to read it. It would make no sense. But then they run it through a bunch of filters, and that translates it into something that humans can actually interact with. And we have the ability to just make it so that you can set some of those filters, right? So specific words that you want to add, the name of a dragon, the name of a kingdom, right? And the AI will be able to, you'll be able to flag them, and then the AI will be able to make sure that it's going to get those right. So you only ever have to correct it once, right? And that's a feature that is not active yet, but we are actively working on.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
as far as dialects are hard depending on what you mean. If somebody's speaking English and let's say they're from the South or they're from the North or they're from California or wherever, right? In that case, they'll be fine, right? It'll just translate whatever the words are. If they're using something that has a mix of languages, it's not going to work. So it does require sort of just English, and it's going to try to default to grammatically correct English. And so one of the things about dialects is that a lot of times the grammar itself is different. It's not just that the words are different, but the grammar is different, right? I live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Dutch drop the to be verb, right? And so something instead of saying something needs to be done, they will say it just needs done. And the LL or the LLM is going to be fine dropping that most of the time. But sometimes it's going to say, hey, that's not grammatically correct. And so it's going to try and default to being grammatically correct. So that's just something to be aware of if you're trying to dictate different kinds of dialects for your book. The other question was about accents, and the model we're using is very, very good with accents. It's not perfect, but as long as you can get a clear recording, you're probably going to be just fine. I
That's
have friends with very strong Irish accents who use it just fine. I have friends with heavy German accents who use it just fine. Australian accents use it just fine. As long as you're speaking English, you're going to be fine.
Are there any other little quirks about the software that people should know about before they start using it?
The longer your file, the longer it takes to process. And currently there's no like timer on it to tell you how long it's going to take to process, and that can be a little bit frustrating. So what I tend to do is I tend to chop what I'm recording into 10-minute chunks. And the reason I do that is because it's easier to manage the actual like information in those 10-minute chunks. And so that's currently my process is just to divide them up into 10-minute chunks because If I record an hour, I'll divide into 10-minute segments, and then I'll push that all through. I think that's probably the only thing, is that depending on what's going on in the background, how many other people are using it simultaneously, if you're going to put in an hour of dictation in one go, it's going to take a long time to come through, right? And I mean, by a long time, I mean probably like 5 minutes instead of 2 minutes. But 5 minutes can be a long time if you're just waiting around for it to come out so you can keep working.
That's true.
Uh, but I think that's probably it. And you don't technically have to divide into smaller chunks. But if you do divide into smaller chunks, they'll all run simultaneously, as opposed to one file that just runs, from beginning to end all the way through.
Okay. So if you were starting brand new as an author today, how would you build your system or what approach would you take if your goal was to be a full-time author?
That is a great question. And that's a great question because the answer to this question is constantly changing. And what I would probably do is I probably wouldn't take the same route that I did. I don't think that I would go and I would be a serialized author. And the reason is because the serialization world has just changed drastically since I was part of it. It's much harder to get noticed. It's much, much harder to sort of stand out from the crowd. And the reason is because there are a lot of authors who just use that pipeline now, right? There are a lot of well-established people with big audiences who are using that pipeline. And so the people who read in that space have a tremendous amount of professional content, right? It's not a bunch of amateurs who are all trying to do their best to write anymore. It's like there are all of those people, but then there's also this layer of highly polished, highly produced, stories on top of that. And so readers get all of the content that they want. They don't need to like dig through all of these awful stories to find the gems anymore. Like it's not necessary. All the good stories are there. So I don't think I would take the serialized route, which really just leaves you with two options, right? You either indie publish to Amazon, or one of the other platforms if you're going to go wide, which I don't recommend. But you either publish to Amazon yourself, or you go and you try to find a publisher. And I would 100% publish myself by myself on Amazon. I would 100% do it that way. What I would start with is I would start by going to the places where readers congregate for the kinds of books that I want to write, and I would get to know their preferences, and I would read all of the books in that genre, and I would start building a list of the tropes that I really liked that were particular to that genre. And then I would write a book based on those tropes. And then I would release it and do my best, tell people about it on whatever group I'm in, whether that's Facebook, whether that's Reddit, whether that's, another website. And I would find as many people who I didn't know to tell about my book as possible. And then I would, maybe a week or so after I released the book, I would stop thinking about it and I would go and I would write the next book. And I would repeat that process 6, 7, maybe 10 times. And each time I would focus on refining the tropes that I am writing, figuring out what I really enjoy writing, and I feel like I can write for a long time, and sort of my personal genre, like what my personal genre is, and also what resonates with readers. What do readers actually like? And I think I would repeat that process over and over again. And at some point, and as long as you have mechanisms for capturing those readers, an email list really is all you need, right? But it could be a Facebook group, it could be a Discord channel. As long as you have those things, by the time you hit 6 books, you will have started to build an audience. You will have started to build something. And then you just go and you talk to those people. And literally, you just talk to them, send them emails. I have a buddy who built a ridiculous fan base, because as part of his newsletter, he asks you for your phone number. And then he calls every single person who puts in their phone number. And he just calls them. And he's like, hey, thank you so much for reading my book. How'd you find it? Who are you? Can we be friends now? And he has the most ridiculously loyal fan base. There's a principle that he taught me, and I think is sort of the core of the way a new author has to approach writing, being an author, which is that people want to be noticed, not notified. And when you can build that principle into what you're doing, all of a sudden it really changes the dynamic you have with your readers. And if you can change that dynamic with your readers and build what are called superfans, you will get to the point very quickly where you don't have to do any sort of marketing. All of a sudden, your readers will market for you. They will hand your book out to every one of their friends. They will buy every single one of your books, right? And if you have a strong personal genre, then what will happen is somebody will stumble onto one of your books and then they will immediately buy through your entire back catalog and read everything. And if you have people who are doing that, you don't need a huge audience to make a living as an author. There's this concept that you only need, it's called 1,000 true fans. And this is sort of showing my age on the internet because it's a concept that came out some time ago. And it's this idea that you can build a real life for yourself doing something creative with only 1,000 people who are interested in buying $100 of whatever it is you create a year. Now, in writing, you're typically not going to be selling $100 worth of content to a single person, unless you have 40 books. But if you have 6 books, if you have, 10 books, you're going to be well on your way to developing those 1,000 true fans and developing that library so that every time somebody new steps into your world, every time you release a new book, you have a dedicated group of people who are eager to buy it. I think that sometimes we get caught in this idea that writing is about us and our creative expression. And that's certainly a piece of it, right? That's certainly a piece of it. But when we decide to become an author, we are really in the service industry. We are really serving our readers to to give them something wonderful, right? To give them a story, to give them a moment of reprieve, a bit of enjoyment. And if we can consistently do that, they will come back over and over and over again because we are safe, right? Because they know what they're going to get with us. Regardless of what kind of books we write, if that's their preference, they're going to come back and buy from us. And so I think to, again, sort of sum it up, to give you the short answer to summarize the long answer I just gave you, I would start writing and then I would just focus on writing and I would write the next book. And I would do that until I had 6 books or 10 books. And then I would focus really heavily on cultivating the readership that I had and just becoming friends with those people. And if you can do that, and it's a lot harder to do than it sounds, because writing 6 books without getting that validation from people, because you're not seeing your reviews climb, you're not as fast as you want, you're not getting that positive reinforcement. It's harder than it sounds. But if you can do it, if you can delay your gratification long enough to get those 6 books out, to get, to 10 books, you're going to find that your career will all of a sudden just start taking off. And you won't have to put in all of the effort and the energy that you see other authors having to put in because you'll have built the base from which it will grow naturally.
And that is an entirely separate podcast that we could record at a later date talking about the
Mm-hmm.
business hat of being a writer.
Yes, which is maybe just a little bit my passion.
I know. That came out at Realm Makers when we were in the pre-con workshop, so I got the
Yes.
full experience. I want other people to get it too later.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as we finish, what would be the best place for people to connect with you online?
SethRing.com. If you type my name into Google, I will pop up everywhere, but my website is the primary sort of focal point for everything that I do. If you're interested in the sort of tangential writing stuff, I have a YouTube channel where I release content around the business of writing and just sort of what it's like to be a full-time author in 2025. I also do writing sprints. I try to do them Monday through Friday when my schedule permits. And those writing sprints are just streamed, so you can join in and you can do your own writing as I'm trying to do mine. And yeah, I'm generally on social media, but SethRing.com will get you everywhere you need to go.
All right, we will link to that and bookscribe.ai and your YouTube channel in the show description.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been lovely talking with you again.
Absolutely. This is so fun. I really enjoy it. And so if you ever want to invite me back for that business ad discussion, just let me know.
Exactly. I will. All right, everybody. That is it for today's episode. Thanks for joining me. Actually, thanks for joining us. And remember, the first draft is supposed to be garbage. The Novel Writing Podcast is a production of Colleen Mitchell Writes. For more writing resources, including Curios, Tally Inc. author surfaces, and the 60-day novel writing challenge, check out the links in the description.